Hey, this is Richard from the Metal Cell podcast. I'm delighted to welcome Olin Parkinson of Abaddon Incarnate to the show, and I have Joe as well from Gamma Bomb. How are you, lads?
How you doing?
Very good.
Thanks for joining us, Olin. Good to have you on board, man. I was looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while since I've been involved in anything directly to do with the Irish metal scene, that's for sure. So, yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you very much.
Cool. And do you stay in touch with it, or what's your kind of story at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, over the years in and out, has sort of kept tabs with what Abaddon was doing, obviously, and just remotely, I guess. But then, yeah, things changed a couple of years ago. Just it was a fill-in sort of thing for three gigs, and it kind of snowballed from there. I think just the timing with the guys losing the drummer and that, so it was kind of a, well, what do you think? And obviously with the logistics, it's a bit awkward. But then Steve's over in Leeds anyway, and actually it worked out okay with everything that happened with COVID, because we were always on a sort of a longer trajectory anyway.
Okay.
With trying to get over and back between work and what have you. So actually, yes, it did impact the recording, but it probably would have ended up on a similar timeline anyhow. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. But yes, it is a bit weird, a bit awkward at times. But hey, isn't everything nowadays?
Yeah, fact. And like with Steve over in Leeds, is he the only member over in England?
No, I am as well. I'm down in Devon.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I've been living over the UK since 2004.
Ah.
So yeah, I played in another band over here for 6 or 7 years, but there was big gaps between the time I was playing, and I finished with those guys around the same time. So I was at a loose end anyway when I sort of got back in, or Steve kind of got back in touch with me, and as I say, they had just come back from Australia, having toured with and they had drummer issues over there, but Johnny, I don't know if you know that story, that Johnny was coincidentally over visiting family at the same time. So,
oh way,
yeah.
Johnny from Malthusian, yeah.
Johnny had obviously left, and they hadn't got it. They went over in the hope of doing that tour, which they did, and they had a drummer. Let's see, this is where Steve would come in now, obviously, because But was it Wounded Pig or somebody? Anyway, and he did a couple of gigs and pulled out just at the last minute, and Johnny happened to be over there, and he slotted in.
That's just fucking ridiculous.
I know, yeah. So he finished that tour with them, and then when they came back, they'd still 3 dates to do in Ireland, which Johnny couldn't do. So I was chatting to Steve about it. He was telling me what happened, and I was just said, well, I'll do them. If we do it, a predominantly old sort of set, then I can sort of do those three shows. Which is really weird because we came back, excuse me, obviously to the same rehearsal studios in Whitehall, which I hadn't been in since I came over here in 2004. Same door, same crappy paint. It's just like stepping back into the past.
Did you keep up with what the band were doing whenever you weren't playing with them?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, in terms of albums, and obviously, knew what they were doing abroad in South America, and just kind of a general interest, keeping tabs on it. But as I say, in terms of learning songs at short notice, I was like, well, obviously, I'm okay with Last Supper and The but the newer stuff, cherry pick a few songs off that, and I'll learn what I can. And so it was only for 3 shows, so it was fine.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was really good. And playing Fibbers again after so long was just really quite strange. Yeah. It was a good show. So yeah, then on the back of that, that went pretty well. So they said, "Well,
Joe, you have you members over in the UK as well, or had you?"
Yeah, our guitar player lives in London, and the guy who's playing drums for us at the minute, he's over in where is it, Norwich or something like that, So
yeah, so you understand the logistics of it. Yeah, it's pretty tricky.
But sure, you know what? It's one of those things, isn't it? That like it would be much worse if that person had decided to, stay in Dublin and work in the Spar or something for the sake of the band. You're better off. Everyone's better off doing their own life really, and then make the band work around people's lives, especially the older we get.
Absolutely, and I think with technology now, as we've found out with this album, you can get by so much, can't you?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, this whole album was written virtually, which the lads had never done before. Obviously, because we were, and they continue to be, very much a rehearsal and live band. So I think I sort of forced it a little bit, because I'd been using quite a bit of the sort of stuff, GarageBand and sort of what have you, with the other guys. I was like, we need to do this, otherwise we're literally going to be sitting here scratching our arses for the next.
Lost opportunity.
Yeah, and it worked out really, really well. Once it just, I think it took a bit of a leap of faith, doesn't it? And you think, well, nothing's happening, and then suddenly it just all sort of comes together. You get a few rehearsals, and it all slots into place. And
so what tracks were you receiving then, Olin? What state were they in? Was it just a guitar track, or was there vocals?
What state were they in is a good way of putting it. It obviously started out really rough. I mean, it was almost like tracks on sort of WhatsApp, recorded on the phones and stuff like that, which I'd then sort of bounce into GarageBand and mess around with as much as I could to make it somewhat coherent. And then, I mean, thinking back, it was a lovely summer, that first summer, and I just sort of finished up working for the company I was working for, so I had quite a bit of time on my hands, and just sitting out in the sun, just kind of messing around on GarageBand with them, and so it was really, really rough. I mean, you're talking sort of 4-track back in the day type rough. It was but enough to get kind of the juices flowing, so to speak. And then as the guys got sort of more used to it, then the quality got better as it came over, and then Steve started working a lot more with click tracks, which he'd never really done before. That made my life an awful lot easier, because I just recorded, because it was obviously everything was backwards.
Yeah,
they'd send the riffs, and then I'd try and put drums to it. And initially, we were sort of learning in equal measure, and then as Steve started getting into the click tracks, that helped loads, and then just got into a bit of a flow, and then it was, I don't know how many hundreds of versions of the tracks we ended up with, because every little tweak obviously is a new track and so on. And
which one of the band is the guru of technology, you, Olin?
No, that's I think it's only because I was used to GarageBand from the previous band, and then obviously using sort of the drum software, that helped things a lot. So I guess it's just I had the time. Steve was away a lot with his work. Bill obviously is full time with work, and with family obviously. And then Irina was between sort of jobs and looking for more jobs. So I had the time. So that it made it just made sense, and I was quite happy to do it, because I had to obviously get the drums down and then edit the drums. So it was going to be most time consuming for me anyway, regardless. So it was easier for me just for them to send the tracks over. But
kind of slightly refreshing though, because a lot of the times what happens is guitar players will send over things with drums, programmed drums written, and then they become attached to those drum parts, and then it becomes a whole thing whenever you're having to. So the fact that you were just getting riffs must have been pretty cool to. You're only coming up with your ideas instead of having to use their ideas.
Yeah, and actually with the band before, I mean, they were heavy, but not nowhere near sort of approaching kind of death metal or grindcore really. So I was still in that mindset, and I was trying to get back to the sort of and just a lot more direct, and that took a bit of time to sort of work that out. So there was lots of back and forwards in the beginning. It was like, nah, that's too death metal, or that's not grind enough, or whatever. So did
you find yourself drifting back to the earlier albums?
I think we pretty much like fairly early on we thought, let's go for sort of the chaos we use that term of Last Supper.
Okay.
That makes it sound like we knew what we were doing then. The sort of the energy of Nadir and sort of the atmosphere of Pessimist. I mean, Steve reckons there's bits of every album in there. So yeah, for me, it was definitely much about getting that sort of power and back, but because everything was going to be remote, and because it's the way we eventually decided to record, I think the initial idea was to do it all live, but the songs actually turned out to be fairly complex for a Baden. and there was just no way it was going to work doing it live.
Wow.
So I think it became pretty apparent, which was unusual for them because, you know, I know the first two albums were, I don't know if you know the story of Last Supper, but we had the whole album recorded. We did it, you know, part by part, and we took it back to the hotel, listened to it, and we were just like, it's not us. And we went back in and said, we want to record the whole thing again.
Who were you recording with, Olin, at that stage?
This was over in Tico Tico. Oh God, I can't remember the guy's name now. But he, you know, he'd done Sentenced and sort of fairly big bands and at the time. And yeah.
That was a big call to make, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wasn't impressed. And we just basically put up all the soundboards and recorded the whole thing live in I think a day and a half. And it was way messier, of course. But we preferred it. And we were like, this is who we are at the moment.
Yeah.
It's kind of chaos. And it was chaotic. But I love listening to it now. And I obviously there's glaring mistakes and like really obvious stuff that could be better. But for a first album, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, that for me epitomized who, you know, where we were, and still kind of does a little bit. I'm
sure fans of the band will love hearing that, you know, that like you have a combination of a few of your albums in with the new stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And it was very much simplifying the drums, you know, just as little of, look, you know, I'm the drummer. You know, it was just try and keep it powerful, keep it on track, and just that sort of that energy into it. And obviously with Carl and Johnny, I mean, you know, there's a good lineage of drummers there. So it wasn't about trying to copy what they've done, and just kind of bring as much of myself back into that again as possible. I think, I mean, people will make their own mind up, but you know, listen to it now, I can see similarities with Nadir, drumming wise anyway.
Okay, so we'll listen to Rising of the Lights. They're the opening track, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Man, that's class. What a great opening track as well, Joe. What do you think of that?
Yeah, very, very good. Like, it's definitely sounded very different from Pessimist, you know. And like what you're saying is correct. There's definitely a lot of the death metal in there, whereas I think maybe, I don't know if you're as big a grind guy as the other guys are, but certainly the previous two albums were a bit more grindy. I think the next song definitely has a lot of that kind of punky feel about it as well, which is great. So I think it has the best of the both worlds really in it, you know.
Yeah, I think the direction the guys wanted to go in was a bit more back towards the death metal. I mean, Bill's you know, in the background, and then for a lot, and then he'd come through a load of riffs. And obviously Steve and Irina were rehearsing a lot more together than I could get over for. And I think early on the direction was this is headed in a bit more death metal anyway. So initially, as I say, as I was kind of coming back, I was putting a lot of just straightforward blast stuff to everything, and it was just killing a lot of the riffs. Like you can hear that first riff, there's quite a lot of groove to it, and a lot of the faster blasts were just kind of wiping that out. So over the 2 years, things started to change and put a lot more kind of mid-paced. That song, we had a little bit of debate about, well, obviously the track order is always going to be an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
As to, do we just have a short, grindy track to start, or just having something that's a bit different? And at the second half of that track, because I did a lot of messing around in GarageBand with, there's no keyboards on this album, but we did use a lot of delay and sort of reverb on some of the guitar parts, which make it sound like there's almost like a chorusy bit that comes up just after where you stopped it there. But it's all just guitar. As I say, there's no keyboards. So there's definitely a sort of a more atmospheric element to it. And we thought, just with the title of it and with a lot of the stuff that Steve was coming up with vocally, it suited it a bit more to be a little bit more atmospheric than just straightforward kind of punch in the throat grindcore. So there's a real mix on it, definitely.
Yeah. And what made Abaddon go with Chris Fielding?
Me.
Good choice. Good choice.
I had recorded with him. I've recorded with him a couple of times with the other band, and he's just his patience. He is so patient, and he just kind of seems to get things. I mean, as you guys probably know, he's and it wasn't even that, because when I recorded with him first, I knew he'd done Primordial, but it wasn't actually for that. It was his work on Discarnate, his first album.
Yeah, they're very good.
And second album, sorry. And that's what kind of drew to him first, really. And then just talking with him, he's brilliant. I haven't, from my perspective, from a drumming point of view, he's just the right mix of being pushy without really winding you up.
Yeah.
And so, and thankfully, the guys seem to really get on with them, and he got the best out of them and so on. So just,
How long did it take you to lay down the tracks, Olin, for the drum?
Day and a half, I think. Wow. Yeah.
That's some stamina there.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I was quite surprised because we weren't massively rehearsed. We had 3 or 4. Well, I was over for a week before the studio, and then I think I had 3 days in total. And then we were mixed up because Bill had issues with his kids, and Irene was working. So I think we only had 2 full band rehearsals.
Yeah.
Before the studio. But then I've got the electric kit at home here, so I was able to that. But
I'm right in thinking there was a little while after Pessimist where it was just the 2 guitar players, where there was only a couple of people in the band.
Quite possibly, yeah. Between when Carl, again, you need Steve for the timeline for this, but it was Steve and Bill really have been the mainstay all the time, haven't they? They sort of kept things going. So, I think that there probably was a bit of time between.
Did you grow up with those guys then? Because I know you were Bereaved. Is that late 80s, or when did you guys start playing in Bereaved?
Yeah, so when I started in 1990, so they were already going as Bereaved when I joined them.
Yeah.
And then we fairly quickly changed the name to Abaddon and did the first demo then. But that was back in 1990. So no, I didn't know them. I was relatively late to the party in terms of playing at all. I didn't start playing drums till I was 21.
What? And was it just a little thing in the sound cellar saying guitar player or drummer wanted, or?
It was Paul Kearns. I met him outside Central Bank one day, and I told him I just bought a brand new kit and was bandless, and he said, "Oh, I think the Bereaved boys are looking for a drummer." So I rang Alan Kelly. Do you remember Alan Kelly? Guitarist, used to play with them a long time ago, and he told me to turn up to rehearsals, which I did, and he hadn't told Bill and Steve I was coming. So I was sitting there behind the kit, And they walked in, they were like, who the fuck's this? And so we just did a bunch of covers, Slayer and Metallica and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, I was ropey as hell. I think, as far as I remember, I had just kind of clicked playing double kick about a week beforehand. It was just this mystery, you know. It wasn't working. And managed to kind of click with it. But it was enough at the time, considering their sort of playing standards as well. And then just sort of went from there. But I think very quickly started to get. But I mean, death metal was really growing at the time, wasn't it? And it was easy.
I was just going to say, you came in at the right good time, you know.
Yeah, to get on that bandwagon, and we were all into the same stuff. Alan was a bit more Slayer heavy, but Bill and Steve definitely like Immolation and Morbid Angel, Deicide, you name it. So yeah, it was just good timing.
Had to listen to the Brave demo there, the 91 one or whatever, and I thought it sounded actually pretty good.
Yeah.
If you consider a lot of the other Irish demos around then, like studio-wise, tone-wise, they weren't really that great, whereas it's not really that far off a Morbid Angel demo, really, is it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I obviously didn't play on them, but I think Alan was quite good with his techie sort of stuff at the time, and I think he pushed them quite hard because they were still quite young, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously still in school and that, but I mean, for me, you know, they sort of handed me these two demos after that rehearsals and like, right, learn these for next week, and I was like, whoa, you know, it was just like amazing, considering, as you said, you know, I lived in Blessington, and you know, I was hanging around with like Cursed Earth and those guys, and that's kind of what I was.
Okay.
So then to come out to get these, and it was like, wow, an actual band in Dublin playing actual death metal. This is amazing.
It was a nice scene back then as well. A lot more bands, I suppose, mainly death metal, as you said, was just really kicking off. And the trash scene, Joe, was kind of heading the other direction, was it really?
Bands like Predator and were kind of on the way out, really, weren't they? And et cetera, et cetera. But like I think that there was certainly, I don't know if you would remember, there was some northern bands. They're probably a bit later than you guys, like Putrefy and and stuff.
We played with Putrefy quite a few times with Jason. We were good friends with him for a while, and Afterlife, obviously, Morphosis, and all those boys were still going, but they were way more established than we were at the time. But the scene was really good then. I mean, I remember, you know, going into the Rock Garden. This is before I was started playing drums, and I think it was Afterlife we're playing actually. And you know the way in the Rock Garden they just always had too much dry ice. It was just filled with smoke. And I can't
hell, yeah.
It was just this wall of sound, you know, the drums, and I was like, oh my god, I couldn't even see the drummer, but I was like, I want to be that guy, you know. Couldn't see anything. But
when was that, Olin? Roughly, like
1990-ish, 91.
Yeah, because I remember the Rock Garden, because I'd moved up from Cork to Dublin at that stage, and that was one of the main places to go to.
Yeah, we had the free Sunday afternoon tickets and all that, you know.
Fucking hell, that's mental.
You get a block of tickets and you're thinking, you know, could you give them away? Could you? Fuck, not a chance. But but yeah, they were good. Just the scene was definitely good. I mean, I think, you know, it's still all right, isn't it? I mean, I think it's distilled now, and the bands that are still there or going, or the quality is really high.
But I think kind of the scene is so small that like you won't get a lot of bands ripping each other off, you know.
No, thankfully. But you know, that's you compare it to New York or, you know, Florida or whatever, where everybody there was enough to support a scene, like a proper scene. And the spirit was there, but just the numbers weren't, unfortunately. But and then of course you don't have the premises willing to stick with it and support it either. And of course
that's a major problem. Yeah,
venues and
you might be able to confirm or deny this. Somebody told me that the old where was the place out in Dunleary that used to do all the gigs?
Top Hat,
yeah.
Was it there, or where's the place Sepulture and all used to play all the time? McGonagall's,
yeah.
They didn't have a license to sell beer, so they were only allowed to sell wine or something like that at the bar at the time.
Jesus, that could very well be true back then, but it didn't seem to make any difference because everyone was so hammered by the time they got there.
Yeah,
you wouldn't know, would you? So
but that's the good thing, though, like that. If you think about back then, bands like Pestilence and stuff were able to come to Dublin and get 500 people into those sort of places, like, you know.
Absolutely,
and now we're back at that again. Now where a band like Pestilence can come and play wherever, the Button Factory or something, and do well out of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think was it DME? Is it or DMP? The Dublin Metal.
DME,
yeah. I mean, they obviously worked bloody hard to get that up and going, didn't they? I mean, when I left Ireland, it was kind of fledgling, but I know they were responsible, obviously, for bringing some pretty big. I went to see Capital Decapitation, whenever they came back there last time. I can't remember where they played though, but but they're bringing bands like that over. You got to give them credit, because no one else was. I know MCD, but they would always go for the sort of the big proper guarantee, wouldn't they? Yeah. But
Carcass or whatever.
Pardon?
Carcass, bands like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the sort of the guaranteed ticket sales, but for sort of an outlier country, it does pretty well. I mean, God, it's better than down this neck of the woods. Down in Exeter, we get nothing down here. Bristol's the nearest sort of we sort of go to see any decent bands, but they rarely come any further to southwest.
Kind of bit of it, like it's how do you sort that out though? Because I'm sure even if you had a brilliant package coming to Exeter, like people are so used to not going, or the scene's dwindled so much that
it is. It's
if you look at all those old Venom posters, they used to go and play like all these like town halls in Hanley or wherever. People would all drive to go,
Yeah, it's I think because it's that size of town or city, it's a university town, but not a big enough sort of like Bristol again, which has that massive diversity. Exeter's the West Country. It's not, and metal is not really a kind of a hand in hand thing. And actually, down in Cornwall, there's a bit of a crazy kind of grindcore crust scene, which every so often rears its head with a random gig down near Newquay or something, and you'll get people going to them because they're so rare. But the Cavern in Exeter is a great little venue, but it's hard to fill it. It's hard to fill it unless you get a student night, in which case half the people who are there wouldn't know anything older than sort of or smaller than Metallica anyway. It's a funny sort of scene here, really.
Olin, what was your memories of going into the studio to record for the first time? Was it Last Supper LP, was it?
As in album or first time ever? The Last Supper, I mean, when I think of how that all got organized and what we sort of did, I guess every band has a similar thing with the first album. You just wouldn't do it now. You just would not do it. And getting up to Finland, and we all sort of traveled sort of separately. And I remember I was a day or two behind the guys, and I got up there really late, and then had to get this train to Oulu, and they got in there. Ticket office was closed, and I think it was about 1 a.m, and this train pulled up. I thought, well, I might as well get on it. And they were all sleeping compartments, and so I stayed in sort of this section of the carriages in between with my cymbals and all that. I was just sitting on them, and this conductor comes down and starts speaking to me in Finnish, obviously, and I'm like, sort of thing, and tried to explain as best I could that there was nowhere for me to buy a ticket, and I was thinking he's just going to kick me off, and it was just forest, as you can imagine, just nothing. And he just got exasperated and just kind of shook his head and walked off. So I was glued, trying to see every time he came to the place, like, is this Oulu? No, is this Oulu? And eventually he saw this. Oh, fuck, jumped off. No idea where the hotel was. And of course, mobile phones weren't sort of a thing then, and wandered around at about 4 a.m, and eventually found what I thought was this hotel, came in, and somehow, things just work out, don't they, sometimes? And walked into the room and the guys were all there asleep. I was like, oh, awesome.
Jesus Christ.
And it smelled of broccoli. They had a couple of like weird chemical processing plants there, and the whole place smelled of broccoli. So it consisted of 3 weeks of us eating these weird sort of soggy burgers in this little cafe restaurant place, and in and out to the studio, and one bar that had any sort of rock jukebox at all, mainly ZZ Top, and playing pool, and not really having much of a clue what we were doing. But
what record label were you with then?
That was Season of Mist.
Okay, Season. Okay,
yeah, Season of Mist. So Yeah, that was on the back of When the Demons Come demo, but it sounded nothing like it. I don't think I was that happy with it. As I said, it was a very random sort of make it up as we go along recording. But yeah, nostalgia is great, isn't it? And you look back on it now, and it's kind of, as I say, every so often I'll stick it on when I'm drunk and just love it, because it's just so messed up, and Bill's solos are all like so out of place but just seem to work, you know, the harmonies that shouldn't be harmonies, and yeah, just I don't know, and the drums are all out of time and everything, but hey, just you know.
Can you remember what were the ambitions of the band then, Olin? Was it just to get across to the UK and tour, or were you looking further afield? Like, how old were you then? Like, you were early 20s, obviously, I'd say.
I was, yeah, so I would have been about 21 or 22, maybe, I think. The guy's 18 or 19, I think, something, whatever.
Jesus, yeah.
Maybe a little older. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think, because you were from sort of Dublin, and it was so hard to get bands to do any sort of serious gigs with, or bigger bands. I don't think you thought beyond the immediate a little bit. It was just, you were so in it. It was just what you were doing. It wasn't even right, here we come, you know, world domination type sort of thing. I don't think we thought beyond it. It wasn't until I think Nadir started coming around and we started taking things a bit more seriously that we thought maybe, you know, you'd like to do more. But then it was difficult for me, I think, because, as I said, I was that bit older, and I was sort of thinking, Christ, you know, what's going to happen? Am I going to, you know, stay in Ireland? And so, yeah, my ambitions were kind of going a little bit sort of elsewhere, and stresses were starting, you know, as you get older, and jobs and what have you. Yeah. So that took its toll, I think. And I was in a different place. I was a bit more sort of, I guess, intense about it. And if I wasn't seeing results, then I was getting quite frustrated. And so, yeah, I think it was inevitable that things kind of went the way they went, and that we went sort of separate ways for a while. Obviously, Corey had left as well, and then he came back after I left. And so, yeah, I needed to get out of Ireland anyway, for lots of reasons. It's nothing illegal, but just family-wise and all sorts of stuff. I needed to get out for a while.
External pressures, in other words.
Yeah, just life, isn't it? So
it's a common enough story, Joe, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you know, I think it's after a little while, unless you have some sort of insane management or some sort of huge push behind you, you have to reconcile with the idea that there's not going to be like a pot of gold. And so the more that you kind of ignore all the other stuff that's going on in your life, you know, it's kind of to your detriment, you know. So yeah, I think it happens a lot of bands, you know, once you've had like 5 or 6 years of all running around as a gang having the crack, everyone has to take a bit of stock and say, right, I need to look after, you know, the rest of my life for a little while here, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It's very difficult, isn't it, to have that frank discussion, and because it's admitting that you've given up on a certain
or you don't have faith in the team anymore, you know. And like, I think it's a great testimony to you and the lads' friendship, you know, that obviously you were one of the people that they could immediately say, here, what about stepping in, and then you got on so well that here you are back again, you know.
I know it is bizarre, because it's something I didn't think, you know, if you'd said to me back when I came over here first. But then, you know, if you tried to force it, it wouldn't have happened. It just, you know, it just kind of fell into place. And yeah, same as yourself, it's not easy, and you got to either accept that that's just the way things are now, but that there are compensations in terms of being able to do things remotely, which we wouldn't have been able to do back then. Which keeps things ticking over. And obviously with Zoom and everything else, you can have band meetings like this, and even, you know, it makes a massive difference, doesn't it? Just having that sort of face to face. And yes, we're still sort of planning for stuff, but who knows? I'm hoping to play some shows in April, the Siege of Limerick being one of them. Class. But yeah, who knows? It's like you don't want to get too excited about it, because, well,
would you say the band have been hindered as well with record label issues?
Again, Steve would be a better one to answer that. I mean, with Transcending, obviously we haven't released anything with him yet, but he's been really good in terms of everything he's sort of promising, and judging by what his release schedule and the standard of stuff he's releasing at the moment, you know, we've got no real issues there. But yeah, I think Candlelight didn't quite work out for them the way they wanted it at the time. But yeah, unfortunately, Steve would be a better person to ask about the intricacies of that. But I don't think it's ever straightforward with the label, is it? I mean,
he suffered that way too, Joe, didn't she?
Yeah, but sure. Yeah. You know, I suppose you just have to take the rough with the bad. Like, and you know, it's not as if either of our bands were ever in a situation where you were like talking about major label deals and huge advances and stuff. So like a lot of the times, especially with labels like Candlelight and stuff, it's just very much what you can get out of them, you know. And if they say they're not going to give you tour support or do videos, you know. And again, back then, like, it's going back to what you were saying, Olin, like back then doing that sort of stuff was an enormous undertaking, whereas now, because of the way technology's moved, you can do a lot of that stuff yourselves. Like, you know, you could do an amazing video from your rehearsal room that would be out of the total budget 20 years ago. There's no way that it would have been possible, you know.
Yeah, and the thing is, when, you know, the band that I was playing with over here, they just released a new video, and Jesus, I don't know how much it cost them, but it's proper like green screen, you know, special effects, thousands and thousands, and you know, they'd be lucky to get sort of 20 likes on Facebook with it. And so, yeah, I get it's fun to do for sure, but it's a bit of an ego trip more than anything else. And even big bands, you know, will have to justify doing videos like that nowadays. Yeah. So exactly as you said, you can do just as much of a video and get just as many whatever hits as you want, just doing it on your phone. And
the thing is, like, if your fan base is getting older, right? There's a lot of people who have been listening to, you know, Abaddon since the 90s or since the early 2000s and stuff. The older they get, they're probably the same as yourself, and they don't really have the same amount of time to sit about on YouTube as they did, you know, 10 years ago. Like, the older your fan base gets, you have to try and get to them whatever way that they're going to do it as a middle-aged person nowadays instead of a 20-year-old, you know?
Yeah, no.
That's true. Good merch.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you do grow up with your fan base for sure. And for me, as I say, coming back to it, it's interesting to see the people who are still around. And it's you know, when I came over here first and I'd stopped playing, and you then realize how much a part of your identity when you grow up with it, how much a part of an identity it is for you. Not just necessarily being a part of a band, but saying, you know, that you're a guitarist or vocalist or drummer or whatever it may be. And that's really hard to turn your back on 100%. So, you know, I think at this stage, you sort of accept that it's not going to go away, you know, not without therapy anyway.
Are there people who were at the Dublin gigs back in 1990 who are still arriving now bald with wee tufts of hair on the sides? No.
Yeah, no, I still have a bit. I'm all right. Still, just not to cover up bald head. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's it is funny, but yeah, like I say, they're still there.
Like, the band have a fucking seriously big tour base. I mean, they've toured no more than yourselves, Joe. South America and Australia, Russia as well. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I obviously didn't do other than the first Australian trip. You know, I haven't done the rest with them. So South America, I think, was a bit crazy. But yeah,
that's to admire them for getting out there. I mean, Jesus Christ, you can count on two hands probably the amount of bands that have played out there. On one hand, even in the Irish scene.
Yeah, well, as you guys are saying, if you want to rely on a label to get that sorted for you, it's not going to happen, is it? So, yeah, I've got nothing but respect for the guys for keeping it going and as you say, pushing it continually, because I was always surprised, and I guess I am a bit with a lot of the bands in Ireland now, that they aren't bigger than they are.
It's frustrating, put it that way.
And I'm not just adding, you know, yourselves and all the other, but because, as I say, I do pay attention to it. I do listen, and the standard was always pretty good, but I think it's really high now. And if you had bands of a similar kind over here, they'd be a lot bigger. Or you would be a lot bigger over here. We would be. Well, maybe not the sort of the heavier stuff. I think the scene in the UK isn't as big for extreme metal compared to, per capita as it is in Dublin or is in Ireland. Definitely not as in Europe. But it is frustrating to see bands from Dublin, from Ireland, all over struggling to get that kind of social media footfall, if you like, for how good they are, because you stick them on beside any other band from Europe or the UK and they're equally as good, if not better in some cases.
You're spot on. That's the reason why I do this show, man. It's just to fucking send the fucking flare up into the sky saying, hey, look at our scene. We're as good as anything in Europe,
But occasionally it'll break through, and I mean, Terrorizer had an article a couple of years back, or maybe more now because it's obviously gone. They had a coverage of the Irish scene, didn't they? And they covered whatever, I don't know, was it 8 bands or something? But then
the problem, Owen, as well, is that the Irish media in general have no time for heavy metal, and they never had.
No,
even back when you were going, they never had. They had no interest in it.
What was his name that used to do the Sunday evening show? Oh God, I can't remember his name.
John Kelly, is it?
John Kelly?
Might have been, yeah.
Can't remember, but yeah, just getting your demo on that. It was amazing. Of course, it was only you and your family who'd ever listen to it, but
it's still the same though. Like 10 years ago, or maybe a bit more, our singer Philly used to work for the Star, or one of the Dublin papers anyway, and they were offered an interview with Metallica, with Lars or whatever, and the paper were not fussed on the idea. They were like, yeah, I don't know, is it worth our time really going and doing that? Which is nuts. Like, just goes to show, and especially consider there are some countries like Finland and some of the Nordic states where the artists get so much support. I think Turbo Negro got a tour bus from the government.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Could you imagine that in the South? Imagine.
Yeah.
Just be mad.
It is. I think it's part of its charm, isn't it? In a way, I mean, you talk to people over here and tell them that the figures that'll attend Hellfest or any of the big festivals in Europe, they won't believe you. You show them videos and they're just like, this happens every year. You're like, yeah. Every year. I mean, it's always been that way with metal, and in some ways it's that kind of bittersweet, isn't it? You kind of like the fact that people don't really know, but yeah, you lament the fact that you're not sort of front page news all the time. But
did you guys start off kind of acknowledging and knowing that you were going to have to get the ferry from over to Holyhead and do it the way that every Irish band has ever kind of done it? Or were you kind of like, oh, I don't know if we want to start having to do that, going and getting the boat over, or rough traveling around?
What, for tours?
Yeah, starting off, whenever you first leave Ireland to go and do that.
Trying to think. I think when you're so caught up in it, it's not like now where you sort of think, oh Jesus, the logistics of this are going to be a nightmare. You just kind of you decide, well, this is what has to happen, and kind of so like that Czech tour that we did with Desecration. We did some dates over here, and it was just, if you sit down now and say, right, break it down and say, this is the amount of hours you're going to spend in that bus. You draw up your sort of, cost benefit analysis of what you're actually doing. No one in their right mind to do it. So I think it was just not, oh God, what about ferries? It was just like, how do we get to do this? Yep. So, I mean, that Czech tour was insane. And the Australian one was just as crazy. I mean, I think we did nearly 10,000 miles in sort of 9 days, because obviously you can cover that kind of ground very quickly in Australia. And similar to everywhere else, you're playing to 20 people, but you still do it. So nowadays, yeah, it's a bit different because things are so expensive now, and you just, I don't know. I mean, how about yourselves? Do you think like, well, if we're not going to at least cover our costs, we're not going to do it, or do you not care now?
You know what? I think the older you get, the more kind of gets like golf. It's like you and your mates weekend away on the drink. Yeah. So I suppose it's great. Obviously, we tend to try and only do it if all costs are covered and stuff. But going back to the old ferry days, it was walking over to everyone in the band had to come up with the 40 quid to get the sail rail to London to play in Camden or whatever, and you would just keep going back and do it. Yeah. And I think that was just because we were very like, having played gigs in Dublin and Belfast, it was a bit of a, it's not really going to ever get any better than this, you know? So like, you're better off going and playing in front of absolutely nobody. And we used to do the old classic thing of arriving just with no gear and then hope that the other bands in the bill would be sound enough because you'd come from Ireland to let them use your heads, you know?
Well,
they weren't.
I think I left before things really got to that point. I mean, I played with Blast Cage for a year over in Nottingham, who became Earthtone 9. So I'd gone over for a year to the UK just after I've left uni, so I just wanted a bit of a headspace thing. And so that was my sort of first taste of playing bigger venues, LA2 and stuff like that, and getting a sense of what could be achieved with a band that wasn't necessarily huge, you know. So I think when I came back to Dublin and then joined, and that's when sort of the Nadir started happening, that's when we kind of started thinking a bit bigger. But then again, obviously, as I say, things went south before. So really, again, Steve would be a better person to talk about that evolution of the band when they started traveling to the UK more and stuff like that. Because, as I said,
like, what was your own personal favorite gig with a band?
Oh God. I mean, the obvious one would be the Morbid Angel support, I suppose. And that's not just name dropping, but we were such big Morbid Angel fans at the time. And so just to be sort of hanging out and chatting with them, even though we only played for like 10 minutes or something.
Really, yeah. Jesus.
I think we had 15 minutes. I think we had, because their sound check went on and on and on and on, as you can imagine. So, we didn't have much time, but it was still amazing to sort of be in the same room as those guys. But other than that, I don't know.
Your worst one. How about your worst one? Is that an easier question?
God, I remember one in Fibbers. It wasn't a particularly awful gig, but it stuck out in my mind. I always had, I guess, most musicians, particularly drummers, would have a fear of forgetting a song.
Okay.
And it was during the summer. It was a beautiful day, and it was one of the all-day shows that Fibbers used to have. And we got up, and I don't think we were too pissed, but anyway, people started shouting for I Hate off the first album, and we hadn't rehearsed that song in I don't know how long. We just hadn't played it. So Steve was just like, yeah, let's play it. And I'm like, okay. So we started playing, and we come out of a section, and I was like, well, it's either going to be blast beat or double kick. So I just went for blast beat, and the guys were kind of like, so we sort of, did a bit of a fill and finished about 2/3 of the way through the song, and everyone was like, hey! It's like, not clue where we were either. So it's just, well, I remember absolutely hating that, because that it was more about the feeling, knowing that it was coming up and you did not know what was coming next. But as a whole, we were generally quite good at being able to kind of, I guess that most bands who play together for any decent length of time, you get good at sort of anticipating mistakes and covering and without making it look too obvious. But I think that was my sort of worst fuck up with it. But we didn't really ever have awful gigs. We had, I can't think
much of an archivist, man. Like, as in, do you keep all the like first demo or posters from the 80s or 90s? Or?
I did have a lot of them back at home, but my parents got rid of a load of shit when I moved out. And unfortunately, a lot of that. But I did, last time I was back, they pulled out, by some miracle, a shitload of old T-shirts that we had done. One from back in the Bereaved days as well.
No way.
Which, I still have upstairs now. So, I've got
Did the band think about that? Like, as in, would you like to do, like, old demos or, like, old live shows and try and put them out there for the fans and stuff? Or?
Actually, have you seen that box set thing?
I did, yeah. Fucking hell. With the syringe and all, and the blood, kind of blood pack.
Yeah. So that I think was brilliant. And obviously that wasn't our brainchild, I mean, stuff like that is amazing, though. The fact that fans, for want of a better word, are willing to go and put their hand in their pocket to do stuff like that is amazing,
But like with Transcending, they did a super job. I don't know, are you aware of Soothsayer?
Oh yeah.
From Cork, yeah, they did an amazing job on their merch, and they had a coffin.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Release with the CD. So a label like that definitely will go the extra yard for you if you're.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how he does it. You know,
who else was they have a lot of bands, man. Transcending
35 tracks on this label sampler. There you go. And then, you know, some of them are a crossover from last year, but yeah, it's a huge amount of bands. And I mean, obviously no one's going to like every one of them, but I mean, I listened to it the other day when it came out, and there isn't a bad track on it. I mean, it's not that I love them all, but you know, it's not like, oh, that's a bit ropey. They're all like, good quality. But how he's bankrolling it, I don't know, because every release gets the same sort of quality of you know, production, and it's on all vinyl as well. It's amazing, really.
And what have he kind of planned in relation to, we'll say, this release? Will there be a physical copy for the fans? Can you go that far into?
Yeah. So as far as we know, he tends to go for vinyl production first, so he knows he's got that secured. But at the moment, there's huge delays with everything that's going on. So until he gets that confirmed, because the CDs aren't the issue, we don't know numbers wise yet. But yeah, CDs, vinyl, the same sort of package he seems to do for most new releases, including merch.
Excellent stuff. That's great to hear.
Well, we don't have a date for it yet. But he has all the inlay information and all that sort of stuff now. So I guess, you know, within the next.
We do the title of the album, a reveal there.
The Wretched Sermon.
Okay, cool, nice one. I'm glad you said it, not me. It came from Olin first, not me.
It's all right. I think we've mentioned it on a few things in the social media anyway.
And is there a story behind the title, or does it correspond with the artwork?
Yes.
You could have fun with that artwork, man, with that title anyway.
Have you seen the artwork?
No.
Because we haven't seen the full artwork ourselves yet. We it kind of went hand in hand, I think. And we didn't necessarily want it to be a song title or anything like that, just more, as we're talking about, sort of the atmosphere of it. It does kind of fit in with, I think it was kind of fairly, as you know, a lot of people say, a kind of an organic process. It wasn't let's just come up with a title and work from there. Steve's kind of lyrics and ideas are always very formative in terms of where that sort of stuff comes from. And yeah, it just kind of fit. And you don't like to explain these things away too much. Well, you know, you like people to come up with their own sort of interpretations of these things. But yes, it definitely was kind of spurred on by the artwork a little bit. As long as it goes the way we think it's going to go, because Kunal's going to come up with his version of it. So
cool. So we're going to listen to track 7 of the album. It's called Killing Spree. Lovely touch there at the end, man. The drumming in that is outstanding, man. Congrats.
Isn't very Lombardo-esque, nearly, isn't it?
Sorry. Oh, yeah. He's
Ernest Fix in that as well, man. Fucking great.
The little piano bit at the end. There's a little story behind that. It's not long if you want to hear it, but we've got a friend over here who I do a lot of climbing with, and his wife had a serious ski accident where there's another guy came down, hit her in the side of the head. She wasn't wearing a helmet, he was, and she ended up with quite a serious brain injury. And she essentially lost the use of one of her hands for quite a long time until she kind of got it back. But she used to play piano quite a bit. And I was sitting working on the demo for Killing Spree, and Nick sent me through this little bit of piano on WhatsApp. Said, "Oh, Philippa managed to play this today." And I think it's Bach, actually, a little piece of Bach. But anyway, so as I was recording it, I thought, I'm just going to stick that at the end of the song and see what it sounds like. And stuck a load of reverb and all that sort of stuff on. I sent it to the guys, and they were like, "That's awesome. Where'd you get that from?" So I told them, and they were like, "Right, we're using that." And that bit of piano is the WhatsApp recording that Nick sent me that I messed around with on GarageBand. So it's the actual recording of it.
That's class, man. It's a nice touch. Fair play.
Yeah, it just really fit. So I sent it back to her, and I mean, they're not metal fans at all, like nothing to do with it, the climbers, mountaineers, this sort of stuff. And I sent them, said, "Philippa, as long as you're okay with it, you're now featuring on a track called Killing Spree." She was like,
that's fucking brilliant. So have you any idea of when this is going to be out, Olin?
Honestly, no definite date. As I say, he has everything now that he needs to produce the CD. So the last time, Steve kind of is the one who's dealing with Canal.
It'd be such insane delays, man. See, he spoke to the guy from Prosthetic, and he said that it wasn't necessarily the record companies. They said that it was the wax that the vinyl's made out of. Said that were they're making it.
Yeah.
That bands who could be waiting 6 months. As in you could be just waiting for 6 months for it. And as you said, it's just impossible to do a CD and online release and then expect to do good record sales. You really have to do vinyls first,
I mean, we'd love to have some, physical merch for the Siege and things like that. So we did say that to him. So if he does kind of, obviously he can get the CDs done a lot easier. So we'd hope that maybe April, but we don't have a definite date yet.
I was to throw 3 European countries at you for a tour. Give me 3. You can you can exclude the UK and Ireland.
Okay. I'd love to go back to Germany. I think. I mean, it's easy to pick the Scandinavian ones, isn't it? But I'd love to go back to Germany. I'd love to go back to Czech Republic again. That was crazy. And maybe somewhere a bit warmer. So maybe Spain.
Malta.
Spain would be nice.
Malta. There's a fucking great scene in Malta. Shout out to Jim Tobin.
Yeah, we've played, not with the band, but I've played in Malta, and that was quite an interesting trip as well. But Malta would be nice to go to. I mean, but I'd love to go back to Germany. Germany was brilliant. The guys everywhere that we went to would just treated you really well. It was just a really good trip.
Yeah, they loved their metal in Germany. Myself and Joe and a few more were supposed to go over for a trash festival there. It was knocked on the head there. I think it was around the 20th, Joe, was it, or something like that?
Yeah, it was indeed. It was Sodom and Legion of the Damned and a couple other bands.
Tankard, I think.
Tankard, Jesus.
Really good, man. Great band. And it's a bit nostalgic, I know, but just leave us on a bit of an old funny story there. What was the craziest shit you saw at gigs?
Probably in Slattery's, I think still.
Slattery's? Jesus, there's a fucking memory.
I know, and you did mention nostalgia, so I think we have a video, not of this particular incident, but I think we have a video of the gig somewhere, and this guy was just, from the second we got in there, he was absolutely hammered, and halfway through, I think it was Chapel of Ghouls he used to cover. And he just gets up on stage and just starts stabbing himself with a glass in his arms, like
Jesus,
he was just like, Steve, I just remember Steve kind of looking at him and still trying to do the vocals and pretend nothing's happening. But you know, you think, yeah, this is awesome. I mean, of course it's not. It's insane, but like
that's up there. Fucking hell in Slattery's like.
And I think it's more because of where it was. You know, if you were, you know, at one of the bigger festivals, or you see crazy shit, but. Yeah, that always stuck in my mind just because of where it was. It was just, we're like,
Christ,
we're causing this poor bastard to do this here. You know, what's going to happen if we actually get anywhere with this? You know, but yeah, that was quite funny. But
nice.
Other than that, fairly tame and normal, I think.
Mm.
I'm sure the guys could fit in with some weirder stuff from South America, but
yeah,
unfortunately, I didn't get to experience that.
Okay, man. Listen, I'm going to leave you go. Olin from Abaddon, thank you so much for coming on the show. Best of luck with the wretched sermon. We're all eagerly awaiting that. And yeah, so, you know, just keep an eye on your social medias. You'll keep us up to date anyway, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No, thank you very much, guys. Nice to talk to you both.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Joe, as always.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Richie. Take care.
And crucially, support your local metal scene.
Take care, guys. Thank you.